I was known as the girl who doesn't want to come out for too long because I didn't like being cold outside and wet and whatever. But I was inside with my book by the candle. By the candle.
There you
go. By the candle.
I can totally picture it that way. Yeah.
Or if we had electricity, but I didn't want my mom to see me that I was reading late into the evening. When I was slightly older, I had a torch under my duvet. When somebody tries to limit me in any way, that's like a trigger. Oh, no. That's not what it's all about, is it?
You've got some critical thinking there, huh?
So it's all about, I might prove you wrong. So the first few things are understanding what is the difference between trading as a sole trader versus being employed, and which is crucial sometimes because they might be having 2 or 3 jobs. Although the income might not be very high, they might be paying unnecessarily high taxes.
Welcome back to the Future of Skills podcast. And today we are having an episode about essential skills, essential life skills. And I'm thrilled to introduce you guys to Adela Cebotari, who is a UK expert tax advisor with over 20 years of experience managing the tax management for her high net worth individuals, for entrepreneurs and content creators. And because the mission of the Future of Skills podcast is to help the emerging but also established professionals, we are going to look at the skills that are driving us forward, but also the back-end skills, such as the tax management, that we are going to dive in today into more details, as they are essential life skills. Welcome, Adela, to the show, and thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me here.
I am usually diving in as part of the first question setting into the 3 key pillars, 3 words that would best describe you. Can you please describe yourself in those terms?
I am organized, I am kind, and I'm trustworthy.
Thank you so much. It paves a nicely route into exploring this further. So could you tell us a little bit about your early career journey? How did you transition into the field of curated finance and taxation? And what were some of the specific triggers or maybe some preconditions? And was it more of a natural evolution?
Certainly not.
Well, let's have a look. It becomes interesting.
In those days when I started the career path in tax profession, most people would end up in the profession sort of stumbling into the profession. I remember it was early 2007. I was looking for a job, and a mum at the school kindly offered to take my CV because they were looking for an administrator in the company. Had I known what kind of company, had I known what type of industry? No, I was just looking for an administrator job in London. And it happened to be one of the leading accountancy firm at the time in the UK, Advantis. And I was very fortunate, considering that I had no experience in the industry at all, no background in tax. I was very, very fortunate to have that opportunity. And from there on, it was curiosity. I was hearing these conversations around what my colleagues are talking about, tax this and relief that. And I was very curious to find out the meaning of those words and, seeing some numbers on a paper. What do they mean? How do they, the back of the envelope calculation is always referred to. Sometimes like, how do you do a back of the envelope calculation? What does it mean? So that curiosity led me to wanting to explore it more and basically nagging my manager, can you please help me, send me on the path to become a qualified tax advisor. So started from there.
Thank you for the answer, Adela. And I remember when we first caught up preparing for the interview today, you were alluding to the fact that one of the key elements of that journey was curiosity, wasn't it? Hence why you've just mentioned you were on the pathway to ask a lot of questions, right? So you were reliant on asking questions, and being curious, I suppose, portrayed you as someone who is interested in the role. Hence why not giving you that support would have been a bit of a shame, I suppose, from their end, wasn't it? But it was you who initiated that drive, wasn't it?
I think it's really important that you initiate any drive to whatever dream you have. I don't think there's a way of getting somewhere in life without wanting it yourself. So I've always wanted to become a professional. In what field, I wasn't quite sure earlier on, but hence this opportunity has led me to be more curious about becoming a tax professional and what it involves. And you very well mentioned, I was very curious or annoying. I don't know where the difference lies, but not certainly, but perhaps I may have annoyed some people along the way with my persistent questioning on how you do this, why you do this, can I do this, and not being afraid of taking on the challenge that comes with that curiosity. Because when you become curious, you want to explore more. By exploring more sometimes means you have to take harder tasks and get involved in harder tasks and take responsibility and ownership for the challenge, as well as for the mistakes that you make along the way.
Totally
because those mistakes are so critical in building your character and helping you building the knowledge. Because very often, without making a mistake, it doesn't stick to you as well as, by just reading something or just by doing something that ticks all the boxes. You don't remember that emotion. When you make a mistake and you're prepared to learn from it, that's where leads on to progress and to more curiosity. Okay, so I made this mistake. It led me to this result. What else? What else after this?
Thank you. That's very inspiring, actually. So making a mistake is a key element of your pathway, isn't it? Otherwise, you don't learn from it, you don't establish and erase the precedents, I suppose, so that you can become even better.
It's also accepting that mistakes are part of the learning and not taking them personal, because that's something, it's very hard earlier on, particularly when you're younger and, to accept that you've made a mistake. But the knowledge comes after you've accepted that mistakes are part of growth.
I'll try and rephrase what you were just saying into making it of a sum up by saying that mistakes don't build you. You learn from them. They're part of the establishment. They're part of the grounding.
Absolutely.
But what's helping you growth, essentially.
Okay.
In terms of becoming you, I often love this question because it gets to understand a little bit more about the intricacies, about the personal development of any given guest that we have on the show. And as part of that, I'd be very curious to learn a little bit more about your childhood. Were there any particular mentors, key moments that you felt have been absolutely crucial in helping you become you?
Well, absolutely. I was very fortunate to have a lot of amazing, inspiring women around me. So the first one being my mum. She's always inspired me with her resilience and with her way of not looking at problems and dwelling on it, but getting into a situation where sometimes was for others from the outside, it's like it's impossible to come out. She was always finding a way of overcoming those problems, and without too much thinking. It's like, okay, what's the solution here? So I've always had that, inspiring me. I've got my grandmother, who's always been a very inspirational woman, and her sister. So these three women have built my character and have built, the resilience and the problem-solving skills I've learned earlier on from them. In terms of childhood, I was born and raised in Moldova. I'm very proud of my heritage. I was raised in a village. Growing in a village, being the eldest of three, always responsible for my younger siblings, always trying to help. So, and always, again, curious. If there was an after-school club at school, I was always there, whether it's knitting or singing or dancing or whether it was a chemistry Olympics or foreign languages Olympics, I was always there. I always wanted to strive to be a leader in a way, and had had those qualities. I was head girls for a few years for my class. So always trying to be an example earlier on for my younger siblings, and then sort of always had in my mind that my parents have to be proud of me. So it's a quality that stays on with me for life, I suppose. Yeah, and one of the things that marked me and has always stayed with me from early childhood was interest in reading. So even, I don't know if you remember, but we had the blackouts, particularly in the winter evenings when we didn't have light,
we didn't have any light, any electricity at the time.
Electricity for the time. And in winter, a lot of in my neighborhood, it was really interesting because there were a lot of children outside going on snowboards or sleds, playing around in the snow. I was known as the girl who doesn't want to come out for too long because I didn't like being cold outside and wet and whatever. But I was inside with my book by the candle. By the candle,
there you
go. By the candle.
I can totally picture it that way. Yeah.
Or if we had electricity, but I didn't want my mom to see me that I was reading late into the evening. When I was slightly older, I had a torch under my duvet. So
you're not the only one with that technique, to be honest. It stayed with a lot of us.
Yeah. So reading is a skill, and to this date, I can't go to bed without reading. Even if it's a page or two, that's something that I have to do every night.
That's quite inspiring. You know, I've read somewhere that if you do read or have a habit of reading before going to bed, that actually helps with your brain operations. It enables a certain process in your brain that is actually responsible for the longevity of your whole body. So, you know, it kind of is interconnected, apparently.
We shall live and see.
Yeah, we shall live and see, but definitely no harm in that, is it? Yeah. Thank you so much for the answer. It is very, very telling when it comes to your journey and how you've ended up being where you are at the moment, advising the other, interested people who would make it a bit more of a secure, a bit more informed living out of their day-to-day operations. When it comes to the motivation and challenges, I appreciate that you might have had a few on your way that you needed to overcome. And when we've caught up earlier in preparing for the podcast, I remember you were saying that there was one person in your pathway who was obviously either your line manager or at the time was your supervisor, who gave you a particular comment that stayed with you. And it probably would have been a motivator, probably would have been a challenger, but it did say to you that why do you actually need to invest more in your learning? You're already good at what you do. So how did you approach that type of comment? Because I appreciate it could have stayed quite a bit ingrained in your mindset.
Going back to my constant drive of wanting to be a leader, not necessarily a leader as in, look at me, what I'm doing, but a leader for myself. I wanted to make sure always that what I'm doing, I'm growing in my own way. And I'm proving to myself that I've taken another step and I can do it. And I can do the next one. So that curiosity leads to opening paths, vision paths. It's like, okay, so something else is possible. Okay, so if I do this, then I can do that as well. Or if I get this certification, that would give me X, Y, and Z amount of new knowledge, experience, and I can do X, Y, and Z new tasks. That would, So when somebody tries to limit me in any way, that's like a trigger. Oh, no. That's not what it's all about, is it?
You've got some critical thinking there, huh?
So it's all about, I might prove you wrong. So even though it's nothing to do with the next person, it's all to do with me. So that person...
And your take on it.
Yeah, and my take on it. And it's about that drive to continuously learn new skills.
Quite admirable, because on the flip side, what it could do for you is perhaps stop you, reconsider you in a different way so that you don't necessarily pursue that. There are tons of us out there who are not necessarily wanting to do more and rather feel that it's quite okay where I am, probably. Why should I put more effort if it's quite okay at the moment? Whereas what you're telling me, it sounds like you are thinking a little bit ahead, a few steps ahead, and thinking, am I going to be okay still at this pace tomorrow, the day after tomorrow? Well, if not, then it's something that I should be doing about it, right? So it's kind of that mindset that I hope that a lot of our people out there who are listening to us and watching us would try and cling on, because it seems it's a bit more productive as it stands. Now we're going into a setting of an operational type of questions, which are to do with your profession implicitly, which is tax advisory. And we're going to talk a little bit about taxes and how they work in the UK. Now, again, as you know, before the interview, I've been preparing and reading a little bit more of taxes. That's not my area, not my background. I'm a marketeer, as you know, but doing taxes for me, it's a bit more like unveiling the black box, as you'd expect.
Well, like it would be for me doing marketing. So,
but it is a very interesting area, and therefore, when preparing for it, I realized actually there's so much in it that I can totally resonate why it keeps you motivated and driven. Now, in the UK, as we know, we pay a lot of tax.
We do.
However, understanding how taxes really work seems to be akin to a fish navigating in a boiling water to me.
It can be feel that way, yes.
Now, a common version of the tax UK code, as I hear, with all of the regulations and the adding up legal guidance, can come up to 24,000 pages alone.
Something like that. When I was doing my exams, I used to go, because you were allowed to take your legislation with you.
Right.
So all my legislation books, I think there's 7 now, used to be 5, and then gradually more legislation was added to it. I used to put them in a small suitcase. So in the mornings of the exams, I'd leave my house and my neighbors said, "Oh, going on holiday, are we?" I'm like,
no, exactly.
Yes, straight into the exam hall. And yes, it can feel overwhelming. For an outsider who's looking at it, it's overwhelming sometimes for us professionals, because you get a question and you have to make sure that you get to the right section and understand what angle you need to tackle the question from. When you learn to and get your certification, what is very good about the structure of the exam and the preparation for the exam is helping you understand how those 125,000 pages, how they divide it into meaningful ways. They divide it into financial years, they divide it into tax acts, they divide it into specific types of tax, and then some obviously interact. So that's what the difference between a qualified tax professional versus somebody who's just sort of qualified by experience would be the biggest difference, because a qualified tax professional will know the structure of the tax system, because they have to learn not just what the numbers mean, it's about what source, how the legislation is made, where is, what are the stages of making an act, sort of a proposal into a finance act, what taxes form part of the tax legislation in the UK. So it's understanding the legal part before you get to the numbers, basically.
That makes sense. And it, as you said, it portrays the profession of a tax advisor as someone who needs to be knowledgeable about the ground up before it can make some understanding of how these formulas of adjusting and applying the taxes really works. What do you think, if there is any particular basic learning about taxes that an average taxpayer needs to know to feel himself a little bit more secure? Is there something basic that we all need to learn?
Well, certainly. And this is one of the missions I've set myself, is to speak with more sixth form schools and colleges about getting some basic knowledge to our young people and preparing them for when they enter the world. So the first few things are understanding what is the difference between trading as a sole trader versus being employed, how to read a payslip. You will be very surprised that many young people who start working at 16 and various side jobs whilst they do their A-levels, sometimes they struggle understanding what the figures mean, on their payslip, and which is crucial sometimes, because they might be having 2 or 3 jobs. Although the income might not be very high, they might be paying unnecessarily high taxes. Right. Because the way the tax code is split and, how the automated systems operated by HMRC work. So not necessarily having a tax advisor at that point, because they might, the cost of it, and they might want to save some money on that, but understanding those initial basic information would be very good. Also understanding what income tax, what national insurance, corporation tax and VAT, because these are the sort of main taxes that are applicable in most areas of our lives. what they mean day to day, and how they interact. Again, going back to whether you're a sole trader or a employee. And yeah, a lot of young people nowadays are setting up their own businesses, whether they're becoming very popular with their influencer activity or content creator, which they might not be aware that I need to actually register because I've earned more than £1,000 this year, and this is the threshold for registration. So basic things like this, I think, should be part of early life preparation skills.
That's quite key. Thank you so much, Adela. You've tapped into quite a few questions there and quite nicely have linked them up that I have prepared. One of which, in fact, looks into the tax calculations. You're saying, obviously, there is this minimum threshold of £1,000. If you earn less than that, you're fine. Don't need to worry as yet. Yeah. However, learning how it actually works in the background might help you later on when you will become a high earner. Yeah. So in that realm, what do you think are some of the key calculations when it comes to taxes that we need to be all aware of?
There are thresholds, and once you get over them, you need to do some formal registration.
Be accountable in one way.
And be accountable. But the biggest advice I always give to the younger people I work with or interact with, having systems in place that help you understand how much income you're getting, what are your expenditure, and then understanding the difference between income, expenses, and profit. Because that's also 3 key words that any entrepreneur should know, and should know how to evaluate them. So systems. Having systems in place is definitely my sort of first advice that I give any entrepreneur.
And let's say you have, or let's say you're mentoring currently a content creator, and he's working on a few jobs. One is a day job, and one is as a content creator himself on his own time, free time. So with that, let's say he's received his pay slip from his company. What are some of the key elements of the payslip that he needs to look into?
The PAYE code. So first of all, that the pay is right, according to what he was promised that he would be paid. Sometimes people are paid by the hour. Sometimes people are paid on a fixed salary. So understanding what my contract says and how am I being paid. Looking at the fact how much tax and national insurance. Obviously, for somebody who's not trained to look at the figures, it might be difficult, but looking at their PAYE code, that and knowing what a PAYE, standard PAYE code is, 1257L currently. If that's different, then either them contacting somebody who understands, a tax advisor, an accountant or a tax advisor who understands how to read a PAYE code, in helping them understand why it's not 1257L, for example. Or if they're interested in learning more and getting onto HMRC's manual, they can, do it being curious about it, at least linking the figures.
Got you. Thank you for the answer. Do you think if there are any particular software tools that they might need to consult at a certain stage when they're evolving into becoming a high earner that they need to be aware of? And later on, could they employ ChatGPT for a few questions in that ground? What do you think?
Yeah, ChatGPT has been a useful tool. My only concern with ChatGPT, and I'm trying it on a regular basis just to see how it evolves and how it responds. Sometimes, because obviously we have to remember that ChatGPT is based on data reading.
Yes.
And depending what and how much data it has been able to read to date, it may be slightly outdated in some cases where, tax is an evolving area and there's constant updates, there's constant changes. And just being aware that ChatGPT might not be a reliable source.
Right.
As a sort of guidance, what this means, it might give you a good definition, but how this works, it might be slightly outdated. And in terms of software, most definitely, once somebody is in receipt of sole trading sort of income more than the personal allowance, so 13,000, let's round it up.
Yeah.
Then they most definitely need to seek some, maybe simple Excel spreadsheet, starting with that, but then maybe a free agent account, which will help them sort out categorize their expenses correctly.
Yeah.
Help them when they grow to a level where they need to register for VAT, help them categorize for VAT correctly. So most definitely looking at software is my advice as well.
And are there any particular software you would recommend at that stage, or you'd rather not, given that you don't want to be close to?
They're available everywhere. My one of choice, because I'm a partner free agent, I'm always recommending free agent because it's quite easy to maneuver. And a lot of my clients prefer it because it links very well with their bank account. And I won't go into details, but it can become free. So you don't have to pay for free agent if you have specific bank account, the business bank account. So, but again, I shouldn't be promoting one software versus another.
No, of course, it makes sense.
There are many others like Xero and QuickBooks and Sage. So a lot sometimes is down to preference, how complex the affairs are, how interested people are in different other functionalities of the software, I think.
And that's totally fine. It's great that we're giving the audience a few options, and they then do some research in terms of what some of their preferences and custom choices might be. In terms of simplification, the process, are there any particular mistakes? What are some of the common mistakes you think?
Thank you. That's a very good question. And it's something that the situation tend to repeat themselves, and one of them is hiding things under the carpet, not necessarily in an intended way.
Yeah,
it's just what's not seen, I don't have to worry about. Very often becomes.
Yeah, let's dive in. Sounds interesting.
So we all want to, if we do an activity, we want it to be progressive, we want it to be successful. And very often, whilst we're doing that, we either don't have time or don't have the skills or the interest, or just don't want to look at, what else do I need to do in relation to the income I'm earning and all the activity I'm doing. So it's growing well, the business is successful, I'm being seen as the professional in my industry, and not many people like looking at the numbers in the way that I need to pay tax on it. So unfortunately, I still come to situations where, in particular lately, I've seen younger people, they get really successful. A lot of it happens overnight in the current format, so influencer and content creators. And without realizing, they are getting over the thresholds, but they don't, either through knowledge or no knowledge, they don't register on time. And that means they are late with the registration and sometimes late with filing their tax affairs, like tax return, annual tax returns. And that can lead to penalties.
So being late.
Being late.
Yep. Not
having the systems that I mentioned earlier.
Yep.
That involves a lot of time for an accountant or tax advisor. It's a lot of work for the client because they may be using various bank accounts. And again, not because they intended to, that's how things were. Just the flow has happened. And just helping them sort that out, putting into one business bank account or two business bank, depending on the activities, but having that structured. Hence, I made them organized. So
you have to.
I like structure.
Absolutely.
I like structure. I like making sure that things are transparent and easy flow, and we have records backing up and reporting on time and avoiding all that sleepless nights sometimes. That worry that have I done it right? Have I filed it? Have I, what else do I need to do? Do I need to be aware of anything else? And sometimes the money is being spent the tax is not paid, and then the other worry is, how do I pay all that backdated tax? So yeah, you can avoid a lot of aggravation, a lot of pain if the skills that I mentioned are acquired earlier on. People or sole traders get systems in place earlier on, and then speak to a qualified tax advisor or an accountant earlier on.
Thank you, Adela. Quick question. You've literally inspired me now. It's not necessarily been prepared up front, but talking about some of the fines that can be incurred as part of these activities, have you come across any cases that have gone completely wrong when it comes to the content creator activities, and when it comes to the fines, any too high fines that have been applied for certain activities, do you think? Or given a number might be a little bit difficult?
The number will always depend on the amount of tax that is due. So HMRC has a right to penalise up to 100% of the tax due.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in some cases...
What does that mean?
So let's say somebody had filed their tax return, they're late, but they have a liability of £1,000 for that particular year. Mm-hmm. HMRC will penalise the late filing. It's a straight £100 late filing of the tax return. If the tax return is not filed 3 months after the due date, then another penalty starts being applied, which is £10 a day for 90 days. Mm-hmm. So that's another £900. So very good question. The fines can be as high for a simple tax return that is filed late. The fines can go up to 1,200, and I'll come on to explaining how. So your tax return is due by 31st of January, and if that's not filed on time, there's an automatic £100 penalty. If the tax return is not filed by end of April, there's another penalty that is being added on, which is £10 a day from 1st of May for 90 days. So again, you have £900 that can be added automatically. So we have £1,000 penalty already. If the tax return is late by 6 months, there's another £300 added on top. So you automatically see that there's over £1,000 penalty just for being late.
And does it come automatically from your account? How does that work?
Normally, you will get a notification and you will be asked to make that payment. And I don't think you'd want to be late with that payment, because interest is added daily on it. And at the moment, the rate of interest is over 7%. So mm-hmm.
It pays off to be on time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the answer.
Sometimes the tax may be very low.
Yep.
But by submitting that tax return late, would add unnecessary the fines unnecessarily.
Mm-hmm. So there's definitely something for young people and for younger professionals who are doing various roles at a time, being, something for their drive, for their passion, something that then defines their day-to-day activity to be aware of.
Absolutely.
And then, this question paves way for another, I think, useful route to explore when it comes to tax exemptions. Let's talk a little bit about that, because from my understanding, the classifications of how the tax is being applied over what's considered to be luxury activity and what's considered to be essential, it's quite crucial. Because, for instance, I'll give a trivial example with books. From what I learned from the book is some physical books, if not all of them, right, are considered to be exempt from VAT, versus ebooks do incur a 20% VAT tax on them. How does that work when it comes to saving on tax?
Well, VAT in itself is a unique tax, and there's a VAT Act in itself in the legislation, and as you quite rightly said, there are products that we buy and services that we buy which are zero rated, so there's no VAT applied to them because that's what the legislation allows. Then we have the standard rate of 20%, which is applied to most stuff we buy apart from food, so basic items of food. Yep. So if you're buying, for example, your Reach Tea biscuits, they are zero VAT.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're buying your digestives with chocolate on them,
they luxury.
They might have a VAT, which actually, so I know the Jaffa cakes certainly have. There was a big case about Jaffa cakes being treated as cakes rather than biscuits. So there was a big dispute about the VAT on that. So as you already can see, with VAT, it's a very intricate tax, and you really need to be a VAT specialist to know exactly what item, what professions, and what VAT rate applies to them. And I'm going back to the systems. Having systems in place helps a sole trader or a business categorize the expenditure correctly and their income correctly, so that the correct VAT rate is applied. And there's less room for error.
Thank you so much for the answer. It does seem that when it comes to reporting back to the HMRC, you need to be aware of what types of activities were classed as luxury and then essentials, and what type of tax they have incurred along the way. I do have a quick question around the types of activities that you think every content creator, every young professional need to be aware that it counts as essential, so that they can do it, at length and without worrying too much about the taxes. And what types of activities might be considered as a little bit more luxury, in a sense that they will incur as a result a higher tax?
The tax is applied on the level of income.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if we're concentrating on content creators, for example, so there will be four main taxes that they need to be aware of. Is the income tax, if they're a sole trader, and national insurance, is corporation tax if they are operating under a company, and then you have the income tax as a director and national insurance, and VAT. Mm-hmm. So these are the sort of main taxes that will apply to businesses. There are different registration thresholds for income taxes we've already alluded to, and for VAT.
Yeah.
So if, let's take a sole trader, for example. A sole trader would need to register, not necessarily pay taxes, but register if their income is over 1,000.
Yep.
But for VAT purposes, they only need to register once their income level for a period of 12 months exceeds 90,000. So 2 different thresholds here.
Yes.
VAT at the moment is accounted for every quarter. Well, you have the annual option, but generally is accounted every quarter.
Yep.
Income tax is accounted every year.
Makes sense.
So, and then if we have a company with a company director, then as I said earlier, you have the corporation tax. So immediately as the company is set up and starts trading, needs to be registered with the company's house, HMRC, and then if there's sufficient income to pay the director a salary, then we need to register for PAYE. So we can declare the monthly or however regular the payments, the salary. So the company would pay corporation tax on annual basis.
Is there a defined one, or it's based on the income?
There are 2 rates at the moment for corporation tax, and they depend on the different levels of income, of profits, shall we say, not income.
Yeah.
So there's the 19% rate for profits under 50,000, and it goes up to 25% for profits over 250,000. And then you have what we call a rate in between, which is calculated. I won't go into details on how this is calculated, a marginal rate. And then, again, the companies have the same VAT threshold as individuals, 90,000. So,
thank you so much. It gives a little bit of a perspective. Of course, we don't need to go into too many details, as we need probably another episode just for that. And I suppose one defining question that I would leave completely to you before we go into our exciting flash interview, which is a question and answer, which is again a tradition now of the podcast. I would really appreciate you letting us know to become a bit more accountable, to go and set ourselves on a bit more of a safer sale route. What are some of the key habits you'd advise everyone taking on?
Being organized. It's most definitely a skill that every entrepreneur should have, well, it's not just about taxes. Being organized in business is key, as you know yourself. Making sure you have the systems in place,
Yep.
And making sure that you have a team of advisors that you can count on. So your legal advisor, your financial advisor, and your tax advisor, an accountant, should always be part of a growing businesses team. Yeah, you might not always need a lawyer, but you will need them for the drafting of the initial contract and the initial internal, contracts of employment and contracts with your clients and suppliers. So all that. So being organized is definitely one of these key skills any entrepreneur needs.
Thank you, Adela. It's been such a pleasure, and thank you for the awareness that we're helping grow when it comes to these absolutely essential life skills, as you've quite rightly mentioned earlier. And the exciting part, as part of our interaction today, is also our flash interview, and I will allow myself to read because it's a one by one. So shall we drum roll and dive in? Ta-da! There we go. So first, what inspires you about the future?
It inspires to see my children progress and create their own happy and fulfilled lives.
Thank you. What concerns you about the future?
The loss of human element and interaction. That's my biggest scare.
Thank you. It's a very deep topic, this one. Thank you. You're most passionate about?
Family.
You're most scared of?
Letting people down.
Skills for life or skills for growth?
Skills for growth, definitely. They become skills for life.
Artificial intelligence or human intelligence?
Both. I would say both, but in good proportion. But would always, I would still keep emphasizing the need of growing human intelligence.
Thank you. We actually had the interview last time on the podcast, Roger Spitz, who is the futurologist, and when asked about that same question, he did say human intelligence simply because it feels that the ground, as he explained, machines are trying to be more humans these days, and vice versa, humans are somehow sliding into becoming more of a machine mindset.
Yeah, that's true.
Next one, please. Most precious AI skill?
Data analytics.
If you could get a superpower, what would that be?
Making people see beyond their problems and actually look for solutions. Life is so simple, but we often overcomplicate it with worrying about the wrong things sometimes. And
here's an open-ended defining question. If you were hiring someone tomorrow for a crucial role on your team, what would be the one skill you'd consider absolutely essential? And could you describe that skill as if you were explaining it to a 5-year-old?
Very, very good question and very deep. I'm always looking for kindness in people, because when if you're kind, then you will be respectful. You will be interested in the other person. You will be kind to yourself, and that's also very important. And then when you're upset, you can find ways to breathe and smile. And then once you do those things, you start seeing things in a different way.
I'm already lured into that atmosphere. Thank you so much, Adela. Such a pleasure meeting you today and having this interview.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here.